I guess my first question I want to ask you, and this is kind of out of left field. You've been very successful at sailing Etchels. And everybody that I've talked to on this show that has a world-class reputation, Gary Jobson, Peter Eisler, Dennis Conner, they all say the Etchel is their favorite boat in the world. So with the snub nose end of that boat, whether it's an E-scow or an A-scow, my question to you is, what is it that you love so much about Etchels?
It's the tight racing, without question. You can go 2 miles on a beat, and everyone they approach the weather mark at the same time. It's really comes down to the small things in the sailboat, and pulling the right lines, and obviously tactically being super sound, get you around the race course faster. And so the boats are, the class has been great in that they've controlled the design of the boat. There's really not a lot you can do, so the boats are really even. And it comes down to the racing, and it's I've been in the Etchels for some time now, and it's been very rewarding for me, because you spend so much time dissecting a race, the starts, the beats, the roundings, all that stuff, and then you come back and you race in, say, a Lightning or a Thistle or Interlake, and all those little things just become automatic. And it's the Etchels teaches you a lot of good stuff because it's such tight racing.
It's not a good-looking boat. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, the Etchels? I think it's beautiful. It's classic. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's not modern, that's for sure. And it's certainly not going to set any speed records, but it's got that classic look that I think appeals to probably I would say older generation, but they've got a youth program right now that's really popular as well.
A lot of designs, I'll give you a good example. The Cal 25s are a good example of having pockets of unbelievable support.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of Etchels in this part of the world. Is there any worldwide?
No. So I think, Greg, what you find is a lot of these international classes, they've kind of gravitated away from, it's just attrition, I think, the more localized racing to more of the centralized racing. And the circuits down in Florida in the wintertime are wildly popular. And the national North American, European and world championships are really popular as well. So I think the Etchels has gone away from that weeknight, weekend type racing with the family to probably a more professional approach, higher end type racing that's done in certain pockets of the calendar. And no, you're right. We've had great fleets in the past in Chicago, Detroit, and Toronto. And there's still a group of sailors, that, myself included, that really hope that it comes back.
I asked the question because you look at a J70 cost and you look at an Etchel cost. You could have 5 Etchels to a cost of one J70 within reason.
Yeah, well, certainly on the secondhand market, that's true. New Etchels is approaching $90,000, so it does outpace the J70. Yeah, but there aren't many new Etchels being built because they're built so well, and there is a vibrant used boat market. So each one has its place, and certainly the J70 is wildly popular as well.
We're talking with Skip Dieball, who is one of the America's best sailors, currently the director of on the water sailing at the Chicago Yacht Club and numerous world championships, Pan American Games. I believe residing on Grosse Ile at the moment, which is I think where we're talking to you from.
Right.
So I appreciate the time coming back and having a conversation with us at Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, and the easiest question to start with is where we start usually with these interviews, and that is to start at the beginning. So for you, it's a Toledo boy who ends up at a yacht club, probably in Michigan. I think it's in LaSalle, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct? And that's the picture behind me, which is North Cape Yacht Club. So talk about the beginning and kind of how it all got started.
Yeah, so I'm a generational sailor. My grandfather sailed, my father sailed. My father was awesome sailor and a national champion in his own right. And my brother and I grew up in a little community called Point Place, which is on the north side of Toledo, and a small club called Jolly Roger Sailing Club, which is situated on the Ottawa River, which feeds into the Maumee Bay, which is part of the western basin of Lake Erie. And spent all my junior years there sailing, a hodgepodge of boats, but the one thing that really got me hooked in the sport was when I was able to crew for my dad and sail, as a family and travel around. And then ultimately, he was a craftsman, boat builder, and he helped me get on my way with my first boat, which was an Interlake. And I teamed up with some good friends, and we ended up having some good success in the Interlake class. And probably in my early 20s, the water levels on Lake Erie in the 90s were very, now we're at all-time high, but back then it was an all-time low, and sailing out of that river was really tough. So we moved up the coast to North Cape Yacht Club, and North Cape is a wonderful facility right on the lake. It takes you maybe 10, 15 minutes to get out to the race course. It's awesome. It's a very, very nice, beautiful spot, and that's where I call home. Most of my sailing's done there.
Interlake, just for us that don't know, maybe describe what that boat looks like.
Yeah, it's 18-foot dinghy, 2 or 3 people, and it's a very simple design. What's not known about the Interlake, that for people that aren't involved in the Interlake, is it was designed by a fellow named Francis Swiceguth, who designed the Starboat. So this one was designed specifically for Sandusky Bay and Lake Erie, and it's a regional class, Midwest of the United States, and probably about a dozen or so fleets: Indianapolis, Columbus, Toledo. You got fleets over in Washington D.C. and Pennsylvania and so forth. But it's a very cool class, very grassroots class, and it's certainly where I cut my teeth in sailboat racing. And oddly enough, I just picked up a boat that my dad had rebuilt. I just picked it up a few weeks ago, and my wife and my youngest son have been racing most recently together. He's 7 years old, so I'm trying to do the same thing my dad did for me.
I had my first ride on a Star this summer, and the only thing I can tell you is that, having been in shape at one point in my life and not in shape, is that I don't have a lot of core strength anymore. And if you're on a Star and you can't do a sit up, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Sure as heck. It's a great boat to sail, man. Is it fast?
Yeah, we often talk about hanging over the side of a Star, and those days have passed me up a little bit, but I sure enjoy driving a Star, that's for sure.
Northern part of Toledo, whenever I take my teams down to Ohio to play, the Pacos is always the old Pacos is always a staple. Although they've gone corporate lately, and I say lately, the last 3-4 years, it's not quite the homey place it was, and I say that based on price, but nevertheless.
Yeah, the place on the east side, that was such a gem. It was like a museum of sorts, and great food. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Talk a little bit about North Cape Yacht Club. I'm sure that gave you your start. That was a spark, I'm sure. I know you're a generational sailor, but sometimes you got to have the structure of a facility when you're younger. So maybe say some things about the club.
Yeah, so North Cape Yacht Club is probably a far majority of sailors than power boaters, but they accept both types of boaters. They have a very successful Wednesday night series and a great regatta series, mostly big boats, Greg. It's the PHRF fleets that you got a balance of jib and main and spinnaker divisions. There's a snipe fleet, Interlake fleet, lightning fleet, and so forth there. But the little boat sailing isn't weekly or on the weekend. It's more of regatta based. So most people, including myself, have a big boat, and we go out on Wednesday nights with a pile full of friends and have a great time. And I've got a Hobie 33 right now that my friends, when I spent time in Chicago this summer, they took it this summer and had a great time. And nothing made me happier than seeing them have fun and do well. So it was great.
There is a lot of conversation on this show about folks that have thoughts and processes about Lake St. Clair and how it sails, Lake Huron. Talk a little bit. I've heard sort of varying stories about Western Lake Erie. Mm-hmm. It's shallower than most of the rest of the lakes. It has a unique process to it, wind prevailing, all the rest of it. Maybe give us a clue as to what it's like if we do come down to the western part of that lake and what to watch out for.
So most of the time, Greg, in the summer, because there's cornfields and good heating behind the yacht club, you get a great sea breeze, and the sea breeze lasts well into the night. So if you've got a morning where it's it's going to be warm temperatures and there's really not a lot of breeze in the morning, you can pretty much guarantee that you're going to have 8 to 12 out of the southeast, and it's going to be great. The water levels are, they range from 9 to 15 feet in that western basin, so the chop gets pretty steep, and that's what I love about it. Is it's challenging upwind, trying to drive through it, but downwind, if you can connect the waves, and it's a great training spot and really helped me when I was campaigning at Finn for the Olympics. It was perfect spot for that.
I think of all the history that we knew about the fighting back in the 1812 and the 1814, and that part of Michigan is really flat. If inland a little bit, it's farmland, and as you get out towards even LaSalle, lots of swamps, lots of estuaries, and those kinds of things. So I'm guessing that the wind builds because the land is so flat, which isn't true moving up the lake or down the lake.
Yep, no, it's got good heating, and there's not much obstruction there, and not many shadows to really squelch the heating. So yeah, it's great. It's really nice, and we enjoy it. And like I said, the breeze really holds well into the evening, which makes these weeknight sailing outings really a lot of fun. Well into 10:30 at night.
Do you remember when, in your brain, the hook was in that this was going to be a strong avocation, if not, as it turned out to be a vocation? Do you remember when that was the case?
Yeah, I do. I had just gotten out of college and had a real job, and started sailing a little bit more as time allowed, and then the opportunity to get a fin presented itself. And I was, out of college, probably, I'm 6'3", 210, 220, so it fit at that time, and certainly a physical boat. And so I was in my 20s, and I had a couple of other buddies that sailed fin. So once I started getting into, repetitive racing and good training and all that stuff, I remember the day, actually, Greg, I was in Miami at the OCR regatta looking out on the bay. I'm like, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. And from that point on, it's been a fun ride. We've had a great time.
From Toledo, Eastern Michigan, you went to school at, you were Huron, or are you an Eagle? I'm curious.
I am the last graduating class of Hurons. And once a Huron, always a Huron. Yeah.
I had a chance to coach the men's lacrosse team there for a number of years. And my cousin was actually a 68 decathlete for Parks and was an Olympic alternate in 68. So
awesome.
I don't think, if you go back to the days of in that late 60s, they had George Gervin. They had a basketball team that was beyond belief.
Yeah.
And I don't think sometimes that Eastern gets the credit that it gets, certainly a teacher school. What was your degree in?
The finance. Yeah. So I was in the business school. Yeah. And when I was there, Greg, they built a brand new facility downtown Ypsilanti. And that was really, it's a special time because, walking into a brand new building, it was really a lot of fun. I remember the very first day I had maybe a marketing class there. And this is when whiteboards were the thing, right? It just came out, whiteboards. And so, this professor grabbed a Sharpie and started writing on the brand new whiteboard, and then took the eraser, and it was like, oh no, they had ruined the new whiteboard. But it was a fun time for sure.
One of my current parents is a board regent at Eastern Michigan. Her name is Michelle Crum. And we always have this long conversation about when they made the decision to build Rynearson. I know this is deviating from sailing, but when they built the football facility and all the baseball field and Ostrike all the way out away from campus, everybody said at the time was going to be a mistake. And it turned out to be 50 years later, it was the same kind of thing. Yeah. They're trying to figure out how to connect campus with the athletic facilities, but that's neither here nor there. From Eastern, I don't want to digress and talk about things nobody cares about. We care about it, but obviously the audience doesn't. At any rate, you've kind of gotten into fins lately, and I know fins at Crescent all of a sudden made a comeback. We've got 4 or 5 of them guys going out pretty regularly.
Yeah, so in the Great Lakes region, there's a really active group. Now, personally, my body's a little broken down these days. I have to get a little bit better shaped if I'm going to sail fin. But I've been a sailmaker in the fin class for a very long time, coached for a number of years, had a great time traveling all over the world and sailing and coaching. And it's really fun to see how this class is, even with the Olympic status going away, how strong it is, both domestically and then worldwide. And I think the one regatta that always seems appealing to me and never really fits the schedule is the Masters Worlds, where they have 300, 400 entries. And it's really super cool to see. And that's kind of shows you the punch that the class is going to have for a long period of time.
You're a small boat sailor more than competitively more than a large boat sailor. Does size hurt you? And I say that based on the fact I found out this summer that my body by myself would be a great fleet for a 420.
Yeah, so sometimes it does, in the Etchels and J70, you really got to watch what the overall crew weight is. Certainly in the Etchels class, you got to step on a scale before the major regattas and you commit to your weight and what have you. Smaller boats like the Lightning, the Thistle, the Interlake, you have a crew weight target for the team. And certainly being a little bit bigger than the average person, I find smaller crew, and it's a balance between, finding the right size and finding the right chemistry, because at the end of the day, you want to have fun sailing with your friends. So I haven't found it to be too big of a hindrance yet, but certainly COVID's packed a few pounds on me, so I got to get back on the Peloton and shed a few, but it's good to get back out sailing with the limited schedule that we have right now, and certainly sailing with my 40-pound son. We're struggling in the breeze a bit, but we have a good time.
I want to talk a little bit about your sailmaking and having switched to Doyle here yesterday, I think is the announcement made. This is one of the reasons we wanted to talk with you, and certainly a little bit about coaching, but you have a unique performance as an athlete. You have 37 either national or international championships. I believe you've been nominated twice for the Rolex Yachtsman of the Year. 2019 and 2019 Pan Am Games, I believe at the age of 48. Is that right so far?
Yep.
That said, you've made some comments that you didn't really get competitive until your late 20s. So my question is, did you always have the ability to be a good sailor at that level? And was it just a matter then of sort of harnessing the concentration? Because you're the opposite of what most of the guys in this sport have become. You've become, pardon the expression, a stud at an older age than maybe some of the other guys. It's kind of the reverse flip of how this goes. And one of the tenets of this conversation on this show is sailing is the only sport you can be competitively at the world level until you're probably in your 50s or 60s. That's not true of any other sport.
That's right. No, and it's funny because a lot of the mentors and coaches I had when I was young, and when I say young, in my late teens, early 20s, guys by the name of George Fisher, Greg Fisher, Bruce Goldsmith, my father, all these guys were older than me, and I'd always looked up to them and watched how they performed, and certainly they helped me along the way. And I couldn't have been where I got to without their help. But I watch closely, Greg, the maturation of sailing with kids growing up through it. And I see a lot of burnout by the time a lot of these kids get out of college. They've done it so much. They've done so many tacks on the whistles. They've done so many roundings. And then you add a little bit of the complexity of having to own your own boat and join a yacht club and do all that stuff. A lot of sailors just drop out, and they see that it's a little bit easier to perhaps crew. What we hope is that they stay in the sport. Now, for me, I always had the ability through my dad to rebuild boats, learn some skills, get some boats that maybe weren't as expensive, build them up, go race them, flip them, buy a newer boat, and basically, get up to a level where I could compete regularly with equipment that was really good. So, I guess I'm a little bit different in that regard, and I'm not looking to slow down anytime soon. I do spend a lot of time in the little boats, but I enjoy the big boats as well, doing Max and stuff.
But in that movement towards being, sort of an international level sailor, national level sailor, when did the light go on, and what made the light go on?
Yeah, probably when I was competing in the Fin, and then I dropped back I'd come back home and I'd race in some of the classes that were just, regional and dear to my heart. And suddenly, we started winning regattas and started doing really well. And, then you get back into the Fin and you're doing the hardcore training and everything. And, the Fin teaches you a lot of things. I mean, it teaches you in a hurry how to sail downwind. And so, probably my late 20s is when the light bulb went off and said, you know what, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I started getting really, really good. I've started getting, multiple national championships in certain classes. And then, then I had my own sailmaking company, starting in 2001. And that allowed me to sail in dozens of classes that we were then able to get some success and sell some products. So that was great.
I always think of the young man who goes from high school to college in that first week at football or basketball. All of a sudden, he's been the star at whatever high school he's been at, and all of a sudden he feels like he's not even qualified to carry the water. And then all of a sudden he either makes or breaks it, one of the two,
Yep.
and becomes comfortable and fits those kinds of things. So in your case, it was like there must have been something, because one of the tenets I really believe is I'm not so sure we understand just how good the sailing is here, competitive sailing. I know it's great other places, but some of the folks I've interviewed, just your neighbor on your boat oh, by the way, I've won, and down goes the flags. I just, having moved to Crescent 5 years ago, it's just been extraordinary seeing how many sailors have the tools and the talent. And some of them don't even necessarily follow through except for beer league on Monday night.
That's right.
It
No,
really-
you're absolutely right. And Crescent in particular, a lot of my friends there, they're so humble, you wouldn't even know, right? You wouldn't know. And so for me, it was, once I started, I was that guy who couldn't carry the water bottle in the Etchells class in 2012. And then we win the Worlds in 2015. We really put our time in and learned the boat and did all the regattas that we could.
So it's like everything else. It's the 10,000 hours. You got to put the time in to make it work.
Well, and I often tell people, especially those that are starting to learn the sport, is, it's just like anything. It's like, bowling or golf or anything. Like, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And the more that you do it, the more you understand cause and effect and, how to make a boat go fast through the water.
For you, is it a hobby or an obsession? And my point to that is that if you can't sail, you just you get mad at the wife, and I'm exaggerating, but
yeah, no, that's a great question. It's probably a little bit of both, right? It's less of a hobby, but more of an obsession. And, when you're not at regattas, you're constantly thinking about regattas, right? And so when you're there in the moment, you're just so focused on the competition side and the camaraderie side. I mean, let's face it, that's why we do it. I was just at North Cape this past Saturday, and it was a small regatta called the Fall Blowout, and it was the 54th annual blowout, which was pretty special in its own right, but you see the friends in the boat park, and that's what fuels it. And then once you get out of the water, you're just like, switched on,
It's an interesting sport. And I don't think any other sport every sport brings those obsessive kinds of personalities, but I think a willingness to share with each other is something that we're doing something on Cal 25s, and not the most expensive boat, but the camaraderie of the Cal 25 fleet is amazing. We've just did a couple conversations with Cal 25 sailors, and the ability to how they cling to each other and race. And I think that's somewhat true of other classes. And
yeah, Greg, I think, the grassroots classes, and the fleet level racing, you gather around a keg and you talk about the day's racing. That goes so far. And as sailmakers, this is what we try to foster, right? We try to get that captive audience so that you can build the experience and everyone leaves happy. That's the whole bottom line, because, if it's not fun, no one's going to do it. And the sport is small enough that you can get world champions and newbies all in the circle and, have a great conversation. That's what's special about the sport.
Pan Am, you obviously had a chance to sail for your country. And I know we've had Dawn, I had the same conversation with her. All of a sudden, it's one thing to sail for a college or yourself or a yacht club. Now you're sailing for your country. Talk a little bit about that experience, and maybe the mind changes a little bit in its process.
Yeah. So it all starts with the Trials Regatta and winning the Trials Regatta, which for those of you that don't know, I sailed with two of my best friends. I sailed with Jody Stark. She's a multiple-time Rolex Yachtswoman of the Year, and Ian Jones, who's a multiple world champion. So together we had sailed quite a bit, and we went to the Trials Regatta in Buffalo. It blew hard, and we had a great regatta, and we had everything clicked. So then the enormity of you're going to Peru and you're going to represent your country, and all the administrative stuff with U.S. Sailing, with the Olympic Committee, with the drug testing and all that stuff, that starts to, build up the hype, so to speak. And then once you get processed through, you get your gear and you get, checked in and your credentials and all that stuff, and you're on the regatta site, it's really, it's a different experience. But I got to tell you, Greg, if we tried to treat every event the same, with the same routines and the same approaches. Now, we didn't have a great regatta, and there's many reasons for that. But to your point and your question, to represent the country when the flag's on your sail, it's a different experience for sure.
It's got to change your mind. I mean, it has
Oh,
to. I think of all of I think of the documentary from the '92 basketball Olympics with the Dream Team. Somebody said, and when the flag goes up for the gold medal, we're talking about the best players that ever played the sport, and brought those guys to tears. So it does
absolutely.
change. It does change the.
Well, and I'll be completely honest with you. That experience, and at my age now, I wasn't the oldest one on our team, let alone the U.S. sailing team.
Right.
But what we found was special was the U.S. sailing team in Peru together. You've got great sailors like Jody Stark, and we can mentor and coach and just be around a lot of these younger sailors that are going to the Olympics. And that's that sort of energy transfer, that lending of assistance, all that stuff was really super special with that experience. And we were all housed in the same facility, and it was great having meals and team meetings and all that stuff. And really it was a special event for sure.
Yeah. A little bit about sail making, and talk a little bit about you've been a sailmaker most of your life, because
I
obviously
have, yeah.
I didn't realize that your dad had built boats, but I'm sure that's where the spark came from.
Yep.
I've had a number of conversations with Al DeClerc and Carl Kruppa and a number of folks. What makes a good sailmaker? And then here's another question, and I've never asked anybody from the sailmaking. Do you have to be a good seamstress to be a good sailmaker?
These days, not necessarily. Certainly, it helps understanding, what goes into sail shape. And what makes a good sailmaker, Greg, is, it starts with the client experience and trying to figure out what they're looking to get out of their sailing experience, and then matching the product up with what they can then use it for. But then, making sure that you understand the boat, the complexities of the boat, the mast bend, the rig tune, all those things go into the ultimate design of the sail. And then being able to deliver and help them trim it. That's the essence of a sailmaker. The nuts and bolts of shaping and all that stuff, it's all computerized these days. So you have to have an understanding of the what the input is that then drives the output in terms of the product. And that's in itself, it's an interesting process. And it's come a long way since when I started, when we just had patterns and we would bend sticks and do all this other stuff. But you don't necessarily have to run a machine. It helps for sure. When I'm behind a machine, everyone's like, "Hey, why don't you just walk away?" Because they know bad things will happen. And there's other people that are much better at it. But a lot of things go into being a good sailmaker. But at the bottom line is understanding what the client's wanting, and making sure that you deliver it and help them use it and try to enhance their experience. That's the bottom line.
I see companies like Sailrite where all you got to do is buy the sewing machine, and then we'll give you a pattern, and away you go. And I think with all of the algorithms and all of the charts and all of the things that you guys go through with angles and all the things that are involved in making a sail, it's, I wouldn't want economy brain surgery. I want the best guy in the room if I've got a delicate operation. And I think that's part of that discussion. But my follow-up to it, that matters. All the things you just said matter for racers. Do you think it matters as much for cruisers?
Oh, more so. Absolutely. Cruisers have a unique checklist of what they're looking for as well. And performance is on their list as well. They want to make sure that the boat they have is easy to sail, and it actually, the sails are easy to trim. And so, it's a lot different if you're going coastal cruising on Lake St. Clair, or if you're actually going to go down to the Caribbean. So you got to match the product. You've got to have the right weight of cloth, and you've got to make sure that it fits the boat perfectly. So now cruisers are, it's a different set of boxes to check, but it's no shorter than racing sailors. That's for sure.
Why is there such a disparaging level of dollars for sails? And I say that because we've had this conversation on the show. I bought new sails last year for my boat, which I think the last time there had been bought sails, Eisenhower was president. It had been long before those things. We went to a company outside. If I had it to do over, I would know now what I know now, I would have done it locally. I would have never did what I did. But we went to price point first because that's what the budget could afford. And if I'd been smart enough about it, I guess my point is that for my boat, there was almost doubling of price from what I paid from what I could have paid. And that just seemed to be odd to me. So I went price point more than I went function. And we're perfectly fine. We're better than average cruising sailors and terrible racers. But so my question is, why is there such a scale of?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's the apples to apples sort of comparison. So without knowing obviously what was quoted by one versus the other, the first thing I would say is was it similar material? Because the material that goes into sales these days, range from polyester Dacron all the way up through carbon fiber, and so that's when you start seeing the scaling of pricing, and then certainly the way that the sales are put together. Are they cut and sew? Are they molded sales? Are they laminated sales? That sort of thing. A cross cut versus radial, that drives the cost as well. And then certainly a lot of the punch behind it in terms of the organizations that support it. They have their pricing programs and their ongoing support that's sometimes built into that, warranties and sale checkups within a year and all that stuff.
Now, you were with North for a long time, I think, and then now you're with Doyle, which I think just something that happened in the last couple of days.
That's right.
Talk about that transfer.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of my career with North sales. I started in the I guess it was the early 2000s, and but I've always been a friend of North, and they build great products. There's no question about it, as do all the other sailmakers. And early this year in 2020, my personal feelings to sailing and what I'm able to contribute, I just basically took a step back and said, what can I do to do more for the sport? And, I had gotten in touch with the Chicago Yacht Club and took their job as the waterfront director, and physically moved myself to Chicago, and my family stayed in Groseal. And ultimately that's how I got back to Groseal, because the move to Chicago was complicated by COVID and other outside influences. But the folks at Chicago Yacht Club, what a great program they have, and what nice people are there, and made a lot of friends. So I came back. I was joking that I was retired, and had fielded a bunch of phone calls, Greg, from other sailmakers, and people just saying, hey, what are you going to do next? And I didn't really give much thought. And then there's some shuffling that happened in the last week, where a Doyle sailmaker in Chicago went to North, which opened up that market. Al DeClerc went from Doyle to Quantum here in Detroit, opened up that market. And then I've got a number of one design classes that we talked about that I try to service as well. So the whole thing came together in a very short period of time, and I couldn't be happier with what I have in front of me. It's kind of reinvigorated me, and I'm energized. I'm ready to go at it. And now what we need is we need this COVID to kind of go away, and some regattas and some rendezvous on the schedule, and we'll be off and running.
When we interviewed Gary Jobson, he was talking about being the tactician on Ted Turner's 1974 Courageous. And in that same race was Lowell North and Ted Hood. And Hood and North had made agreements not to sell sails halfway through the challenge to Turner, because they just didn't like the guy. And so when they finally said no, it turns out the guy on the boat was Robbie Doyle, a 19-year-old sailor. And they literally rented a warehouse, bought him a sewing machine. I don't know how accurate the story is. This is what Jobson's saying. And all of a sudden, they're making sales, and they go on to win the America's Cup. And that's how Doyle sales basically got off the ground. And I'm talking to the guy who's on the boat who made those decisions. Hey, kid, by the way, get up in the loft and do some sales. He had apparently had some background in making sales. And there comes Doyle, and Doyle's one of the leading sailmakers in the country. And it reminded me of a story. Edison had an assistant in his lab, and his closest friend was Henry Ford. And Ford wanted rubber tires, but they didn't grow rubber trees in America. So Edison figured out how to grow rubber trees in Florida, and specifically in the Fort Myers area. So he turns to an assistant and says, by the way, we're giving you this entire rubber plant deal, and you're going to go back to your hometown in Akron. And that turned out to be Harvey Firestone. So Firestone isn't a chemist in the room with Edison. Firestone tires don't come aboard. And there's some correlation to that story.
Absolutely, yeah. I saw the documentary that's from that America's Cup, and how Ted Turner was just beside himself because he was bamboozled by the sailmakers, and what a great outcome that was, and certainly Robbie Doyle built an entire sail-making enterprise, and it's really cool to be part of the people side of the business is what I've been talking about the last few years or last few days. And it just it felt right in talking to the Doyle folks. They cared. They liked the personal aspect and relationship building and the approach to the customers and all that stuff. So it all felt right.
You'll be based here in Detroit then?
That's right. Yeah. So I'm going to have an office here in Detroit, and certainly we're going to have an office in Chicago as well. And so I'll be splitting my time, but mostly based here in Detroit.
Now, we were fortunate enough to run most of our junior programs here. Chicago, you guys got shut down, I think, a little bit more than we did. But talk about the experience at Chicago Yacht Club.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough. My nephew has a boat, 37 Tart, and they were there for a little bit 2 summers ago. They have a YouTube show called Sailing Solianis, and they were there's 2 parts of Chicago Yacht Club, if I'm not mistaken, downtown and then up by the golf course at the Upper Basin.
Yeah. Yeah. So Chicago Yacht Club, wonderful facility, wonderful organization. They've got their main clubhouse at the foot of Monroe Street, which is right downtown. There's no such thing as East Loop, but it would be the East Loop there. And then they've got the Belmont Station, which oddly, Greg, is like 3.5 miles away, maybe, but it's on the other side of the S curve on Lakeshore Drive, but right in the Belmont Harbor. And it's a 2-barge campus, so to speak. One is a sailing school, and one is the member barge, and that's where a majority of the programming happens out of Belmont. And certainly the junior sailing, the adult learn to sail, and the club's got hundreds of boating assets, tons of programming. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people over the last few years have walked through the programs. And many of them have entered the sport and have become members of Chicago Yacht Club, which is, ultimately what they want to try to foster. And so with regard to the junior program, we were shut down. And not to get political here, but the mayor had a lot to say about who was able to get to work and who wasn't. And because we were on the lake shore, and the park district is right there, we couldn't gain access to all the facilities until probably about the 20th of June, I want to say, in which case we lost 1 session of our junior program. We fired up the second session right away, like everyone else. And I saw a lot of the DRYA clubs on one of your episodes with Emily and Christine and the folks, and COVID procedures, all that stuff. We moved all of our stuff outside. It was actually, at the time, was super stressful trying to pull it all off, but looking back, it's really rewarding. Sarah Sullivan and Dave Gerber did a great job with the youth side. Ivan Sagal is the adult side of the whole program there, and it's they're still doing programming into October, and I think our last high school regatta is going to be in November. And I say we because I still feel close to those guys. It was a great team. We had a lot of fun. And all the folks that I worked with at the Chicago Yacht Club, they became friends. So it was a good experience, and I wish them well. And I look forward to working with them, in other capacities down the road.
Right by Belmont, there's a huge park there. There's a golf course there.
Yes.
The University of Illinois has a fall lacrosse tournament there every year. So we played in that park, and it was fun to walk my team down to the Chicago Yacht Club and to their boat. They were and be able to walk through the club, and fortunately had lunch, and we had, I don't know, maybe 18 to 20 girls in there. And if you haven't had a chance, you just can't walk through the Chicago Yacht Club, but it's a special place. It really is a place.
It's funny. Greg, my daughter just enrolled. She just started at DePaul in Chicago, and so she runs track and cross country, and they run past every day, like they do their training on the lakeshore there. And so oftentimes I'll get a quick little text from her that is a picture from boats going out sailing straight away in the morning at the Belmont station. So that's good fun.
This has no relationship, but they have everything there is cement. All of the embankments are cement, and I would think I'd have to purchase an awful lot of bumpers because somewhere along the line I would bang into something. But that's neither here nor there. Coaching is something you've done a lot of, and it's something that's, I think, near and dear to your heart. We have spent a lot of time on this show talking about the process of coaching and how it works. And maybe just give me briefly what you think about what's your philosophy for coaching sailing, and especially at the kids level.
Yeah. So I was going to start with goal setting, and making sure that we understand what everyone's goal is, and it's a sliding scale, because as you start with kids, maybe the goals are not necessarily results based, but improvement based. And then certainly as you get into the adults, and the Pan Am Games in Peru was not my first games. I was a coach at a previous Pan Am Games, and certainly at that level, it is all results based, and you've got to work towards that end. But with the kids, it's making sure that you identify what it is they're looking to get out of it, and a lot of the high school sailing that we've been involved with. Certainly there's results, but there's also team chemistry and matching crews with skippers and A's and B's and all this other stuff. And just you're making sure that everyone has a good time and making sure that they learn, they grow, and they get better. That's the bottom line.
Having taken over at Crescent 2 years ago, my first year, and again, we've had this conversation, but take over 2 years ago, I just watched just to kind of get a feel for what was going on. And I think I was asked to take over because I'd had a career coaching background at being both a high school and college coach. And it was amazing to me some of the things that were going on. An example would be 75% of the time racing, 25% of the time coaching. And when we were coaching, we were always in their ear. There was never any sandlot type sailing. And we kind of changed that. We also changed it even for something for DYRA. I just kind of kept my mouth shut for a year until I finally kind of said, some of the things we're doing wouldn't fly in any other sport because of the way it is. And I said, if you look at the numbers from the U.S. Sailing, we did an interview with John Pierce, who's the U.S. Sailing Director, youth sailing director. And we started talking, and it turned out that some of the thoughts that I was bringing to the table were some of the thoughts that the U.S. team was. It's just basic coaching. And if 70% of your kids walk out the door in the first week because they're not having fun, that you better figure out a way to have fun. So
that's right. And not every sailor, not every kid, not every adult, fits into the particular boats that are offered these days. And so you got to just identify that on the front end before they just get discouraged.
Yeah. We ran a sail lab program this summer. So on Saturdays and Sundays with no supervision except just instructors there to make sure nobody died, the kids could come down and go out in the boats wherever they wanted to do. And what we found out was, which is something I knew from other sports, a third of the kids went out. We put marks in the little bay area so the kids could go out and race if they wanted to, but against each other without anybody. And we put 2 marks out so they could do whatever they wanted. A third of the kids raced. A third of the kids just went out and sailed. And a third of the kids tied their boat to the dock and went swimming, but without supervision.
Yeah.
And you've been to Crescent, so you know where our sail house is. And we cut the willow trees back so parents could sit under the willow trees and watch their kids sail. And we grew from a couple of people who thought it was nuts, and we didn't charge them, so it was free sailing, if you will, because it was part of the package that they'd done for Monday through Friday. And by the middle of the summer, through the end of the summer, we had a packed house. Yep. Every boat was full.
Yeah, a lot of clubs, a lot of clubs will do like free sail Fridays, like a free for all sort of thing. And that's the thing. Greg, I wasn't coached when I was a junior. Like I had no coach. I had my father who made sure that I didn't die, sort of thing, right? And I'd gotten together with a couple of my laser buddies, and what we would do is we would launch our boats. We'd head out to the bay. We'd figure out what we wanted to try to accomplish. Maybe we'd sail over to a neighboring yacht club across the bay, have lunch, get a soda, and come on back. That was what we were going to do. A lot of that stuff is what I remember, and going around buoys on a whistle, all that stuff. Yeah, that's got its place, but you know what? Every single day, it's gonna get old quick.
How do we get the hierarchy, the folks running programs, to think more about that process than trying to build an Olympic sailor? That's been, I think, an interesting discussion for me this summer.
Yeah, I think it comes down to making sure that you can convey what the participation numbers are, because listen, what's in sailing, and I often joke with a lot of my friends that are getting their kids really in the high end of the sport, and I'm like, what's your end game? What are you looking to get out of this? Well, we want our kid to go and it's this college and sail in college. I'm like, then what? Okay, we'll go to the Olympic trial. I said, I've done all that stuff. Like the end game isn't the same for everyone, and at the end of the day, you just want them to enjoy the sport. You in the clubs and the program directors, they've got to set the hook, however that hook gets set, so that they can build their membership base for the future. And that's what these programs are set up for. And if the kids happen to go away to college and they move away, you just hope they stay in the sport. That's the bottom line.
You're fortunate to have all kinds of boats at Chicago. For the rest of us, we have 420s and Optis, and there's been this long conversation over the last few years about, is it appropriate to go from an Opti to a 420? if you're going to buy a new fleet of boats, you're talking about more money than most yacht clubs have. So you're selling the yachts, the assets that you do keep. Is there an intermediate? Is it a foil process between an optimist and or is it maybe more along the lines of bringing back fins and using kids and flying Scots and maybe using the assets we have rather than try to figure out and reinvent a new
yeah, that's a tough balance, Greg, because you've got these, like you've got the National Member Authority, which is U.S. Sailing, dictating what it is that we use at the youth champs and all this other stuff, which is either I-420s or Club 420s, and then laser radial is the one thing that that seems to be at CYC. We have a good team of laser sailors. Now there's 4.7, which is perfect for those opti kids that are making the move. And then you've got the radial, and then you've got the full rig. And when I was a kid, there weren't those options. It was like you went straight from the small boat, which in my community was a little boat called a 320, which was kind of an opti, but a lot less glamour, which, if you can believe that. And we would go straight to full rig laser. And so if you're a 105-pound kid, going to a full rig laser, that was ridiculous. So I think the steps are there. But to answer your question, I don't know if there's anything intermediate other than the 4.7 on a laser, and it brings that platform, and you can scale the sail plan for the kid size. And I think that's probably going to, you're going to see a little bit more of that. And the regattas and the events that we've tried to do on the fun side at CYC has had all of them together. Just have them all racing on the same course to build that camaraderie, and then certainly you've got your little divisions of what sail that they're using. But the 420 is the C420 seems to be the instruction boat of choice. You get cross ties to high school sailing. It is a nice jib and main option for the high school sailing. I don't think the opti and the 420 are the end all designs, but it's kind of the necessary evil that we have. And certainly thinking about something else is what we spend a lot of time doing at Chicago Yacht Club. And it's not even that, not so much on the junior side, though we talk about it, it's on the adult side. What's next? What's the next, for that 25 to 45-year-old that's getting into the sport? We use sonars, and then there's a fleet of Tom 28s that's for team racing and match racing. And is it J70s? Is it the RS21? What will set the hook and what will get people excited? Those are the conversations we have. So there's no answers. It's just brainstorming at this point.
I've got this crazy idea of taking our high school kids who are in their 420s and giving them once a week, put them in Flying Scots. We have a big fleet of Flying Scots. The crew's a little bit bigger. It's a different kind of boat. And then have some kind of a prize at the end of end of Friday, and have the kids race against each other. And I was been kind of shouted down. I think part of it is because our instructors don't like to sail Flying Scots, but they're pretty good for learn to sail, and they must be learning something on the boat.
You peel the layers away, Greg, and what is it's it's a platform that kids can get together, not necessarily a 2-person team. It could be a 4-person team. And when kids sail together and they have more fun, that's what's going to make it happen. If it's a Flying Scot or a Thistle, or if it's a Lightning, or whatever it is, the platform's got to be the apparatus for making the camaraderie work. And that's I don't think you're far off on that. And you do get a lot of influence from instructors who are typically post-college type sailors that are thinking all the time about performance, because that's what's ingrained in their brain. But we got to strip the layers away and say, what are we trying to accomplish here? And lifelong sailors is what we're looking to accomplish. And the Flying Scot has been around for a long time, and it ticks a lot of boxes. Now, is it going to go win the speed races? No, it's not. And that's part of the appeal for some people. But you pack them up with kids, and I don't see anything wrong with that. On Fridays at the end of each session, Chicago Yacht Club does what we call the mini Mac. And they start at the Red Buoy right outside of Belmont Harbor, go around the crib, and come back, and they sail in sonars. And you'll have 6, 7, 8 kids in a sonar. And you can put an instructor, again, to make sure that no one gets hurt. But you race out and back, and easily the most fun of every session is that mini Mac race. And it's because you get everyone together and they're having a good time.
I say that because, having no experience or gaining experience, and this thing's getting in my blood now, all of a sudden it's discussions about this, that, and the other. So every time I have a conversation with somebody at your level, I take the clip, and then I send it to my instructors who are coming back next year and say, listen, I'm dumb as hell, but guess what? This guy, that guy, all these international guys are saying basically the same thing that I'm saying. Because again, it's youth sports, and there's some commonality to making the platform easier for them to understand, especially when we're talking about the federation, which is the governing body for all high school sports, says that 70% of kids, if they start when they're 10, are done by the time they're 15. And it doesn't matter the sport. So if that's true, and we're sending them back to video games and their phones, then we got to do a better job of providing the smile, if you will, in that same discussion. So
I think that's why your Friday thing is so important, because it gives people the sense of independence. Go out, pick what you want to do today. Go sailing, just go have fun. That's how I got into the sport, and the performance will come. Even in the Flying Scot, if you pack them with the kids and you run some races, they're gonna figure out how to make them go faster, and that's part of when you look at all of the classes that I've been able to sail. That's ultimately what I'm trying to do, is figure out each boat independently and what makes it go.
Yeah. I coach ski racing in the winter, and I'm a slalom ski coach. And one of the things the national team has done is they've gone from about 60% race training down to 30%. And 70% of that now is based on just go out and ski with some very specific things in mind. If you're working on an edge, whatever you're working on, you give them the technique in a small class for 5 minutes, and then you go out for an hour and work on that technique. And it turns out they work better on the technique when they're doing freelance by themselves, because they know that they have to accomplish that skill in order to get to the next level of being competitive. So instead of instructor standing over the top and with a whistle, yelling and blowing the discussion forward, they go the opposite. And we're finding out that it's almost opposite of Lombardian football. Winning isn't everything. It's the process to get there. And I think that's the cool part of this whole thing.
Yeah. And like I said, the performance will come if there are individuals that figure it out, and that's what sets their hook on the performance side. So be it. They're going to be great sailboat racers for the rest of their lives. But not everyone's going to want to race sailboats. Like you want some of these kids that to find the love of the sailing. And go. And if they buy a cruising boat, perfect. Let's fill the harbors. Let's go sailing. Let's do what we got to do. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a double thing. If you're at North Cape or you're at Crescent, if you're in Grosse Pointe, there's all these yacht clubs taking a finite number of kids, and we're closing elementary schools. So if we've got less kids every year, then you better figure out. Last couple questions. What's next on the sailing world for you? I know you said earlier in this interview that you're going to continue to compete. Your kids have gotten involved in the process with you. I see, kind of pictures and stuff. And where are you taking Doyle?
Yeah, so I'm involved in a couple of sailing programs, teams at Etchells, J70s, Melges 24s that I'm going to schedule out some time. I'm going to do some sailing this winter. I'm hoping to dust off my ice boat. I've got a DN ice boat, and Ron Sherry, who's been one of your guests, he's a really good friend of mine, and hoping to do a little bit of traveling with the ice boat this winter. Though it's it generally takes a backseat to the soft water sailing that I do in Florida. Some offshore stuff, perhaps, the Lauderdale to Key West race, if it comes off, maybe the buffet race, which is from Lauderdale up to Palm Beach. But just a balance of more of the same on the regatta scene. Certainly, along the way, developing product and testing and, selling, as much as I can for Doyle sales and in these classes. And then, getting back to a lot of the classes that I hadn't been involved in for a number of years that still have some wintertime sailing, the Thistle, the Lightning, the Highlander, and Flying Scot, and Interlake that do pull regattas down south, and it's really a lot of fun to catch up with those. A lot has to happen, obviously, with this disease to free up that schedule, but that's what I'm hoping for right now. And knock on some wood that it's all going to come off, and we're going to have a nice, fun winter time. And then into next summer, it's going to be supporting a lot of the sailing that's done here, the MAC races and Harbor Springs, all that stuff's going to fill the schedule. So it's going to be good fun.
I really appreciate the time you've taken. We had a couple of our members who know you quite well tell me that you're one of the nicest guys they'd met. And after spend an hour with you, I don't have any doubts that that's completely true.
Thanks.
Sometimes I try to turn these into conversations so that I can learn, and maybe somebody that doesn't know as much as you do can also learn with it. And I think that's the mark of a really good coach who can enlighten and help us learn the process more. And you've been terrific. So I'm hoping at some point in my life to get out on the water with you. I'm not sure how that
it'd
will
be good
happen,
fun.
but this has been
Your cruising boat sounds more appealing than anything that I have to sell. So I'd love to have a beer with you on your boat. That'd be great.
I have a 42-inch television, and they keep telling me if I empty the inside of my boat looks like the Ritz, because I just like it to look nice. And it's much more designed for sleeping than it is for racing.
No problem.
But that's kind of the way that works. Anyway, you have a great winter and have a great what's left of this fall. And again, I appreciate so much the time that you spent with us, and be safe and good luck to you with your family.
Thanks so much, Greg. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Appreciate it very much.